Europe's factories once stood tall as the continent's proud testament to progress, innovation, and economic prowess. These industrial giants symbolized strength and advancement, serving as the backbone of Europe's economy for decades. However, today, those towering symbols are beginning to crumble. Germany's once efficient assembly lines are sputtering, steel mills are going cold, and entire industries are teetering on the edge of collapse. Deep cracks are forming, and alarm bells are ringing across the continent. Yet, despite these troubling signs, the full scope of this unfolding crisis remains largely under the radar for many. The grim reality is that Europe's industrial dream is unraveling at a worrying pace, and the repercussions could reshape not only the European economy, but the global economic landscape. The question is, what is driving this collapse and how much worse could it get? Let's delve into this unfolding industrial crisis. Imagine managing a factory that relies heavily on stable energy prices. Now, imagine those prices doubling, tripling, or worse, almost overnight. This is not a hypothetical scenario. This is Europe's harsh reality. The energy price shock of 2022, sparked by the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, has not subsided. Instead, it has evolved into a long-term threat. Factories that once thrived on predictable costs and steady productivity are now grappling with soaring energy bills. Reuters reports that these price spikes are placing immense pressure on heavy-end industries like chemicals, steel, and automotive. Manufacturing. Germany, the economic powerhouse of Europe, is particularly hard hit, with entire sectors questioning their ability to survive under these conditions. Energy is no longer just expensive, it's becoming increasingly unreliable, and for factories, unpredictability is a death sentence. The result, production cuts, factory closures, and countless jobs hanging in the balance. What's worse, there is no simple solution in sight. Europe's push for clean energy, once heralded as a beacon of hope and redemption, is now exposing significant cracks. Take Northvolt, the Swedish battery giant celebrated as a European success story. Today, it serves as a cautionary tale. Struggling with soaring costs and intense competition, Northvolt has become emblematic of the challenges facing Europe's green industrial ambitions. The European Union's vision of clean energy dominance is colliding headfirst with reality. High costs, slow regulatory approvals, and fierce competition from the United States and China are stifling progress. If even a major player like Northvolt is struggling, what hope is there for smaller companies? Europe's dream of a green industrial revolution is faltering under the weight of its own ambitions. The steel industry, often considered the backbone of manufacturing, is another casualty of this crisis. Steel is essential for building cars, constructing infrastructure, and producing machinery. Yet, Europe's steel sector is facing a perfect storm. High energy costs, cheap imports from abroad, and declining demand are pushing the industry to its breaking point. Factories are shutting down. Workers are losing their jobs, and policymakers are scrambling to find solutions. Without swift and decisive action, Europe risks losing a core part of its industrial foundation. And once these factories close their doors, reopening them is no small feat. The consequences of such losses are devastating not just for the workers and their families, but for the entire economy. Europe's car industry, long hailed as a symbol of engineering excellence, is also facing a perilous future. The sector is contending with a toxic mix of tariffs, stiff competition, and skyrocketing production costs. New tariffs threaten to stifle exports, while cheaper electric vehicles from China are flooding the market. European manufacturers like Volkswagen and Stellantis are struggling to compete, caught in a financial squeeze that threatens their survival. If the car industry falters, the ripple effects will be enormous. Millions of jobs across the continent are at stake, from factory workers to supply chain operators. Supply chain vulnerabilities have further exposed Europe's industrial fragility. The COVID-19 pandemic was a wake-up call, revealing just how easily disruptions can bring manufacturing to a standstill. Delays and shortages during the crisis disrupted everything, from electronics production to pharmaceutical supplies. Today, the war in Ukraine and growing tensions with China have introduced new risks. Europe's reliance on imported materials, such as semiconductors and rare earth elements, leaves industries vulnerable to bottlenecks. A single disruption in the supply chain can halt entire production lines, underscoring the precariousness of Europe's industrial foundation. Agriculture, another cornerstone of Europe's economy, is also under threat. Droughts, rising costs, and fierce global competition are putting immense pressure on European farmers. When farms fail, the impact reverberates through industries like food production, packaging, and transportation. The agricultural struggles further weaken Europe's already fragile economic backbone, adding another layer of complexity to the crisis. Factory closures and layoffs are taking a devastating toll on workers and their families. Industries like steel, automotive, and energy are shedding jobs at an alarming rate, and the resulting wave of unemployment could destabilize entire communities. These are not just abstract statistics, they represent real people whose livelihoods are disappearing. Without immediate intervention, the social and economic consequences could be catastrophic. Europe was once a global leader in innovation, driving advancements in manufacturing and groundbreaking research. But today, a troubling trend has emerged. Europe's innovation engine is losing steam. While countries like the United States and China surge ahead, investments in artificial intelligence, robotics, and advanced manufacturing are flourishing elsewhere, leaving Europe behind. Bureaucratic hurdles, slow decision-making, and a lack of funding for startups and research initiatives are stifling progress. This innovation gap threatens to render European industries obsolete. Without cutting-edge technology, factories cannot improve productivity or compete on a global scale. The consequences could be dire: outdated factories, lost opportunities, and workers replaced by cheaper, faster automated systems from abroad. The green transition, though vital, is proving to be a double-edged sword for Europe's industries. The push to decarbonize has forced factories to overhaul their operations, invest in cleaner technologies, and comply with strict environmental standards. While these goals are noble, the execution is faltering. The costs of renewable energy, infrastructure, and emissions regulations are pushing many companies to the brink. Energy-intensive industries like steel and chemicals are bearing the brunt of these rising costs, creating a dilemma. How can Europe stay green without driving its industries out of business? Meanwhile, countries like China continue to produce at lower costs with looser regulations, putting Europe at a competitive disadvantage. If a balance cannot be struck, Europe's environmental goals could inadvertently accelerate its industrial decline. Leadership is another critical factor in this crisis. Europe's political landscape is fractured, with individual countries pursuing their own priorities. Cooperation at the EU level is often slow and inefficient, leaving industries in limbo. While the United States has passed bold initiatives, like the Inflation Reduction Act to support manufacturing, Europe's response has been fragmented and sluggish. Without strong and decisive leadership, industries are left to fend for themselves. Delayed investment plans, factory closures, and job losses are the result of this lack of a cohesive strategy. The stakes could not be higher. If Europe's leaders fail to act, the consequences will be catastrophic. Entire industries could disappear, millions of jobs could vanish, and Europe's global influence could diminish. A weakened Europe would not only hurt its citizens, but also disrupt global trade, weaken alliances, and give rival economies more power. Europe's industrial dream is hanging by a thread. The warning signs: collapsing industries, skyrocketing costs, and ineffective leadership are impossible to ignore. This is not just a European problem. A collapse in Europe's industrial base would send shockwaves through global supply chains, economies, and markets. The clock is ticking, and if these issues remain unaddressed, Europe's once mighty industrial legacy could become just that, a legacy, rather than a future. The question remains, can Europe rise to the challenge and save its factories, or is this the beginning of an irreversible decline? The answer will determine the future not just of Europe, but of the global economy.